I can with this, but we'll see what happens. So.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go next. So I'm Sarah. I guess I got your names earlier, but you're the one who has emailed you probably if you were on our listserv. And if at any point you want to change that in terms of how many emails you get or get off the listserv, please let me know. I won't be offended. Obviously, I don't want to spam your email either. But so I'm a PhD student in human factor psychology. So I study motion sickness and VR devices. Yeah, so Hannah and I are two of 4-ish organizers of this group. So this is just our second brown bag, so kind of have mercy on us as we figure this out too.
Hi everyone, I'm Ankit. I'm a PhD student in mechanical engineering, and my area of research is friction welding of dissimilar materials.
What brought you here?
I'm sorry?
Why are you interested in the Science Policy Network?
Well, I want to learn more about how things go about, the fundamental things. Honestly, I don't have much idea, so it would be good to know get some knowledge about how things work, and who knows, I might find something useful. So,
How long have you been here?
3 years.
Okay.
I'll be defending my master's thesis this semester, then I'll be moving on to my dissertation topic.
Cool.
So I'm Jordan Jetko. I'm an environmental toxicology, currently a master's student, but I would like to get my PhD in toxicology. And so I'm interested in academia, so I want to go in and work as an academic researcher. Part of that is science communication, conveying your information to students, as well as just sort of, I get interested in watching, I guess, the fights on media as far as like science policy or integrity of science. And so I'm really interested in, being part of a community that talks about these issues.
I'm Dave. I'm part of NTAX too. I'm a PhD student there. My work is around looking at the toxicity of complex mixtures in surface waters, quite simply. My interest lies a lot in like public understanding of science and science communication. Which I think here, just the whole time I'm doing environmental science stuff, there's a lot of social justice stuff as far as in the Midwest, especially in the big cities that I've lived in, how to deal with those policies and outreach and communication. So, led me to this little late in the game.
Are you from Chicago?
I am.
Based on what you said earlier about carbon. That's why I picked up on that. Yeah, you did say that.
I'm Will Brockman. I'm one of the seniors. I actually have a PhD in theoretical chemistry. And, my first career was in became an executive there. Very interested in science policy, commercial aspects of science policy. Then my second career was in education, and I interacted a great deal with General Assembly and to a lesser extent the General Assembly of South Carolina, and to a lesser extent with the around areas of science policy. And I found it increasingly difficult to maintain what I would consider an acceptable stance in science versus the politicization of everything. And I'm just to be very.
I'll let Grant
I'm now a non-degree student in physics, just for fun. I like it. I know. Yeah, I really warped since.
That's great.
Yeah, that's really cool, actually. I'll let Grant introduce himself. Grant, if you want to unmute and talk.
Yeah, good morning / I guess it's good afternoon, everyone. My name is Grant Allard, and as Sarah alluded to, I'm one of the people who has been trying to start this group, so we're excited to have you for our second event. Hannah is our first presenter ever, so this is a historic event of which you've decided to be part of. We're working on developing the ability to be able to do these events better. So one of the things I'll apologize for is I didn't hear everything everyone said in their introductions, but it sounds like we have a very diverse group of people with different backgrounds and different motivations for being here. But what unites us is all being able to bring something to the table and learn about science and science communication. I'm a PhD student in the policy studies program, and I research science policy. So for me, it's very close to home, and it's always exciting to be able to see everyone. So thank you, and I look forward to the presentation.
I'm turning you back.
So the first thing that I actually want to do is kind of intensive, so no cringe. What I want you guys to do is to think about what your identity is. So I want you to pick 3 characteristics of yourself that if you were describing somebody as these are what is most important to me about myself, these are the 3 things that I would say. What do you consider to be your identity? Definition of self. I'll give everybody like 60 seconds. You can mull over it. Think about 3 most important.
Do you mean self as in like our research, like academic identity, or
What is most important to you as a whole? 3 things.
One word.
Descriptors. 1 words, 2 words. Yes. Hard to pick.
I think I can start.
Wait. Let's
Hannah's saying wait.
give some more time. Because I was going to say, I know when it was me trying to think of these for myself, 3 things was kind of hard. I'm going to let Grant take the floor while everybody else continues mulling.
Yeah, I think the 3 things that popped in my head first were curiosity, integrity, and I guess you could say making a difference. That's not really a thing, but that's a group of things.
Curiosity is one of mine as well. I think that's a pretty common topic of being scientifically minded as well, in terms of looking for discovery, etc. That was the easiest one. I feel like another one of mine was being ambitious and being motivated.
I think I'll go so that I can give you kind of a better idea of what I was hoping to get out of this. So for me, if I was thinking of my descriptors of myself, the number 1 would probably be college graduate. My education is very important to me, so I would say that's a descriptor for myself that I are. I think another one would probably be something along the lines of communicator, that I'm really passionate about this and you know, extending out to the general public information about science that they wouldn't typically understand because we're not doing a great job about communicating science as a society. So communicator would probably be another one. And those are the main 2 that stick out to me. I would probably, go with those 2 the most. So, anyone else?
Yeah, taking cue from what you said, so I would like my descriptor to be my work, what I'm doing. So I would like my work to make some difference in any sphere of a human being. And second thing would be honesty. Honesty is like very important. And last one would be a bit laziness. So I think laziness should be there as much as hard work and honesty. Those are 3 descriptors.
First characteristic of me would be family. Second a builder. I like to create. I've been lucky to do that. And last, to my relationship with people, I try to be help people see that.
Thanks. I guess one would be student in the sense of like lifelong learner because they get to university. Guaranteed for career. I just don't like status quo. For the sake of just what it is. So I guess that would actually respond to outreach or help that sort of thing. Number 3. I'm 40. So I have 2.
So being very skeptical is something that I sort of take pride in. I rarely take things at face value. I look into my own, especially when it comes to science information. And I think that's one of the reasons I got into science. I studied foreign languages in undergrad. Somebody told me that I think I would find science interesting. So sort of also allowed to use my skepticism to pursue. Sort of against the status quo, it's very, I didn't think of that, so I don't want to like rob Dave of it, but it's so. I find people get comfortable really easy with how things are, and they leave it as the way it is, even though it may not be the best. And so I like to try to poke and prod at things until they realize that it's flawed or need improved. And then about a moment. That's one. That's another one would be just as far as building people up. I like to help people find out what they're good at. Maybe not as much build them up as far as just help them keep going until they find what they're good at. Because I've had a longer life. Not sure what I want to do. I was a foreign language. I think I was a history major at one point, so I didn't know what I wanted to keep doing. So I kept going, and then I ended up in graduate school. So I like to do that stuff.
That's the last place when you were in a foreign.
Right. I was looking for government jobs, stuff like that, like translator. I studied German is the degree I ended up finishing, but I had a minor in Russian and Spanish.
Did you say your name?
Ankit.
Yes. So the purposes of me making you go through this exercise is that I want everybody to kind of realize that we all come from different backgrounds. We come from, different upbringings, and we all have different schemas in the ways that we interpret issues. So whenever we come to the table to have a discussion about something, whether that's science, politics, whatever it is that may be bringing to the table, we have a bias that we're bringing. And it's a perfect segue in talking about science communication, because science communication is mainly about public engagement and public perceptions and trying to gauge those in the society as a whole. And so we do this in a variety of ways. I would say this is probably the majority of what science communicators spend their time doing. By getting an idea of what the public is thinking about a topic, we can develop a communication strategy for how we can get around these biases that people bring to us. Or, we can understand why they regard the subject the way that they do. And we do this on all different subjects. And so, for instance, the Life Sciences Communication Center at Wisconsin-Madison, that's like the hub for science communicators. That's like the place you want to be. That's where the scholars are. And I found this actually this week. They just got a grant from NSF to figure out how to reduce polarization with new science. They're doing amazing things there in regards to all sorts of different subjects. Climate change is a big one. Genetically modified foods, organisms, that's another really big one. The thing that's great about science communication any subject in science that you want to study how people are feeling about it, and you can study it and, define a publication about it. So, public opinion about biotechnology, or agri-food applications of genetic modification, or climate change and how frames matter for public engagement, and how we talk about climate change and the words that we use to describe this, and how our words are impacting the people that are trying to hear the message. And then, nanotechnology, risk, benefits, and trust. Those three things, risk, benefits, and trust, are huge areas of research and communication in terms of framing. Because I will talk a little bit later, if you frame a message from it being a risk to you, something negative that's going to happen to you, you're immediately, people are going to be putting on blinders that are trying to listen. But if you phrase it in a way where it's going to benefit them in some way, they're more than likely to listen to what you're talking about and have a better opinion about it. Trust is a huge one, because we don't really trust the media, and people in recent times don't trust scientists because science is becoming polarized. So these are social issues that we are taking from communication theory to see how we can get to that. Stem cells, that's fun, say that. And views on science and society as a whole, how is the public talking about science, public opinions about genetically modified foods, and it just keeps going. Another place is activism.
Can I ask you a question before you move on?
Yes.
So one of the first things you brought up there was new science.
New science.
Is that a communication term? What's under new science? Like, I guess
It's not really.
it's just something they use for their funding award.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interesting. Do you know what's under new science? Is it? I mean, you talked about like
My
genetic
guess, knowing LSC, is that it would be around climate change and whatever, like natural disasters, big area right now because of all the hurricanes that have been happening. Global warming, types of things like that. Yeah.
It's a follow-up question. So, what do you mean by polarization? Like, is it along the different topics that people want to pursue for research, or is it just based purely on opinion regarding the outcome of an experiment or something like that?
I would say more based on opinion, and polarization studies are kind of like what can scientists do to improve public opinion about whatever the issue is at hand? Because, like I said, we're coming to the table with these different schemas and how we're approaching issues. And so with the current climate, in terms of politically, the messages that we are taking in are then influencing our schemas. And so we're now seeing an age where science is like liberals versus conservatives. And if you are on one side, then the other side is wrong. And so communication research currently is spending a lot of time at looking at how to break down that divide. How do we bring people back together to realize that science is not one or the other? It is something that it follows a set, it follows a method, and it doesn't really matter if you're liberal or conservative. It is independent of that belief.
So it has more to do with the political meaning rather than some scientific association.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I include activism and social movements because it's all inherent and it all works together. In society, when we're angry about something, we're going to come together and uprise against it. Kind of is how this organization came to be, because there's so much going on in the news about policy, and we're seeing so much in our everyday lives about what's happening in the world of science and public opinion. So this is a place to talk about it. March for Science is an amazing example of this, and I include this publication down here because Meghna Tala-Pragada is the one science communicator that we have here at Clemson. She's in my department. I'm likely going to be working with her on my thesis topic. And this is kind of an area where she situated herself recently, is studying the actual March for Science itself and what brought people to the March for Science. And a lot of it she found was there's a lot of interesting things when you look at the March for Science. Some communication scholars are concerned that people mobilizing for science is a liberal move, and that they will discourage people from coming and joining the discussion because science is being seen as a liberal thing now. And so a lot of scholars are concerned about the ways that the March for Science came together and the messaging that they used around that movement. There is also some really interesting sociology studies about social movements together with science. There's a professor named Dana Fisher. I think she's at, I want to say Kentucky, somewhere that direction. And she's researching what the political stance was of the people who came to the first March for Science in 2017. So she went out there to the March for Science. She polled the population and she asked them who did they vote for in 2016, and it was like an overwhelming 99% were going to vote for Hillary Clinton, or they had voted for her. So that
I have a question when you have a chance.
That in and of itself is a perfect example of how science has become polarized to be something that we view as a liberal science. And the communication problem on that end, how do we deal with that? How do we break that? Yes, correct.
2 questions. One is, will you be able to make your slide set available after this?
Yeah.
Because it can't really read your slides.
Okay.
Second is, when you say she polled people, what was the methodology that she used in being able to poll people for the March for Science?
Right. I'm not really sure of what her actual survey looked like, but it was herself and her students, and they obviously had the survey they had developed and gotten approval for, and they just went out the day of March for Science and they were asking questions about political themes. That's as much as I can say now, but I can go back and get a better answer for you. Does that help?
Thank you. That helped.
I may be the only one that perceives, but I perceive an inherent erosion in the credibility of science associated with that. Is that part of the study of science communication?
It absolutely is. Yes. I was going to mention that towards the end, tied up all in a nice little bow, but credibility and trust studies, Magna, one of her big things. And that's a big thing in communication scholarship right now, is how do we improve the credibility of the research that we are trying to explain.
Especially since both political parties are using science as a so-called wedge issue to divide population.
Right.
That doesn't surprise me at all. Everyone who
Yes. Because there's a communication problem behind it. Science did not do a great job of reaching people across the aisle. We're seeing that in politics across the whole right now. And so that's an area that we're looking at. So media effects is really fun. And it goes back to one of the hugest areas of research for communication outside of science communication, just the field as a whole. We're super interested in how the media, influences popular beliefs about subjects. And so I included here, this is called the two-step flow of communication, and it was pioneered by Katz and Laserfeld in the 1950s, and they're 2 of the leading researchers that started the whole communication up at the University of Pennsylvania. And so I love this theory because I think it's very true. It is essentially what you see here is that the mass media is influencing opinion leaders, and then these opinion leaders are going into their communities and they are influencing their followers. That's the premise of it. But what is an opinion leader? It can be someone like a celebrity, of course. Celebrities, they have clout behind their name. So as a good example, in recent times, Kanye West. Everybody knows Kanye is talking to the president right now, and his followers are, having a crisis of conscience with that. Like, are we going to continue following Kanye because we like his music, or are we going to have to disband from liking him because he's now speaking to this president? But some celebrities, don't have a history or a precedent of getting political. So that's a good example. Taylor Swift recently, she reached out to her fans and talked about how she's going to be voting democratically in this upcoming midterm. And just in making a stance alone, because she was famous for not having a stance at all, she never talked about politics, she got 65,000 18-year-old kids to go and register to vote in one day. So perfect example of the two-step flow of communication, where she is an opinion leader, she is an influencer, and she, ignited her followers to, rally around something. The opinion leader doesn't have to be somebody famous, it could be somebody in your own social circle. So for instance, if you are regarded in your social circle as the person that's an expert on a subject, your friends are going to know that about you, and when they don't understand something, they're going to come to you and ask you to talk about it. Same idea, if you're a TA for a class, your students are going to come and talk to you about it because you're the opinion leader in the room. It kind of upends in recent times this, 60-plus-year-old theory is having some questions around it, because some scholars are arguing that it needs to be suspended because it doesn't apply anymore. With having social media being so prominent and having influencers on social media, where you can get online on Instagram and just follow anybody, and then if you like that person, that they can influence your opinion in one way or another. So they some people argue that this should be that reason, but I would argue no, because it still applies. It's just in a different sense. So this is just one example, but media effects are a huge thing. There's also like agenda setting theory that talks about how the media sets the issues that are on the public agenda just by the nature of putting issues on every night. And we are going to be more concerned about issues as a society if the media is the one that's publicizing it. And lots of really interesting stuff to get deeper, how the media is the one that's priming you to think about a subject a certain way, and it's all very psychological. So that's just another example.
Are you going to talk more about the media?
Can I talk more?
No, I said, are you going to? Because I had a question, but I didn't know if you were going to get to it. That's what I was going to ask.
Well, you can ask.
So you have like the model in terms of media influences people who influence other people, but what do you do when the media is divided, which is obviously a current topic? Like, so it's not like the media has one conglomerate opinion on a scientific issue. So when you talk about something like climate change, there is a group of media outlets who say climate change is human caused. There's a group of them that say, no, it's not.
Right.
How does that factor into science comm in terms of what the media shares?
I would say, well, in terms of this, I would say that's another reason why some scholars are arguing this needs to be suspended.
Yeah.
But again, I would say no, because in recent times what we're seeing is that these two, media and opinion leaders, they're working together. They're not competing for ownership over a subject. So, for instance, like I can go and look at the New York Times if I want to know something. But if I don't like what they're saying, if it's, if I'm selectively exposing myself to that, I can go somewhere else and do more research and find other outlets and, mold my followers based on all of the outlets that I just went and consumed myself. And so what can the media do in terms of the polarization? What can people do in consuming their media? That's more of how do we break through the selective exposure that people have for what they want to consume. There's all kinds of research out there about how we are going to go and consume a certain outlet because we know it agrees with what we already think. It's called selective perception. And so we don't know the answer. The best that we can come to, I say we as if I'm like super involved in this, but the best that communicators can come to is motivated reasoning and targeting that, and also looking at how people form the beliefs that they have, because you cannot change opinion, but you can change beliefs, which is opposite of what you would think, but it's your beliefs that mold your opinions. And so if you cannot break through the way someone comes to a discussion with the biases that they have, then you're never going to be able to change their opinion. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
It's with respect to the opinion leader. So we have many so-called opinion leaders. So, for example, you said Taylor Swift said that she would vote for the Democrats, and suddenly we see that thousands of young people started following her. But why don't we see such kind of trend when someone like, say, Leonardo DiCaprio, it's been going on for like years, urging people to take notice of the climate change, but we don't see such kind of following for his actions or his, exposure of the effects of the climate change.
Mhm.
Why is it that it works for someone like Taylor Swift, but not for someone like Leonardo, or even for like I think Gates Foundation also works for stopping climate change. So why don't people take notice of such things and only they follow a few individuals?
Right. So I think it's more not the person, but the issue that they're talking about. So Taylor Swift plays in well now because so many people are frustrated about the political climate. And so many feel like there is an erosion of democracy from where we were a few years ago. And and her just being her the way that she is, when she comes out and makes a political stance after not having ever said anything, she's going to ignite people because she's talking about politics and everybody feels this erosion. It's an identity thing. But for climate change is contentious because it is all reliant on how you're framing the message. So communication scholars now are looking at how do we reframe the way that we're talking about it to get people to care, because arguably that's going to be the crisis of this generation. And they found that when you phrase it as an environmental problem, you're going to lose people. Their eyes are going to glaze over. But if you frame it as a public health issue, for instance, like you may develop some epidemics are going to spread because the climate is getting warmer. People are more likely to care because their health is at risk. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Like that.
Or a national security issue. You know, we're going to see heightened immigration
Something
rates.
which thrills them.
Yes. Yes, which I'll talk a little bit more.
Comment. Sorry. Hey.
Hey,
Yeah. Sorry.
When did you get there?
Yeah. About, I don't know, 25, 30. I had to fix my Wi-Fi, but I'm here now. So yeah, I feel like also kind of following up on that, it's, I guess, a little bit easier to get action from apathy versus when people have stronger kind of beliefs or opinions that exist. So in that Taylor Swift example, you may have people who it's like, I may or may not have voted, didn't really care. And now that, you have this opinion leader making this statement, oh, a bunch of people will jump this ship. Versus if you're talking about climate change or something where, you maybe fundamentally have been raised or taught and you disbelieve parts of it, or you feel like it will affect you in a negative way for you to have to do things you may not want to do, which, I mean, could be simple things like, trying to use more fuel efficient cars and things of that nature, but you may feel like it personally affects you more, so you're more resistant to that change, even if there's someone who you may respect their opinion, saying that it would be positive.
Is there research that shows that time sensitivity is important in messaging? So like obviously Taylor's is like, we have a month till the election. There's something that's versus like Peter DiCaprio's is like ongoing. It's not something that is a one-stop shop versus what she said was like time sensitive, current, specific action.
Aliens and missions.
Yeah.
So it's more like situational. Taking cue from that, recently we had a hurricane. It was like a tornado which developed in the hurricane, and it hit Florida. So is it okay to say that if we broadcasted this message that climate change, not about that drastic change in the tornado turning to a hurricane, category 3 or 4, whatever, will people be able to perceive that message positively, like that changes what we will it affect it, or is it like again situation, or more of like the current thing?
The problem that you run with that, and this is something I'll talk a bit more later, is that we can't come to issues and act like we have an authority on it just by giving somebody information. Just by saying the evidence, hurricanes are increasing because the climate is changing. People aren't going to believe that if they don't believe that the globe is warming. And so it goes back to the biases that people bring to the table. So for instance, with climate change, this is a good example. People in West Virginia don't believe in climate change. I'm not going to say that generally. Most people that live in West Virginia don't believe in climate change because they come from coal mining. And, regulation that was placed on coal mining made it a dying business. their parents lost their jobs, they lost food from their mouths, so they're not going to believe you when you say that they're global warming. They have a strong animosity for the subject, and so you start talking about it, and they're going to fight for it because it personally. And so when you're talking about changing beliefs about something, you have to think about that, and you have to think about who your audience is, which kind of ties into what I'm talking about in the next few slides. So message design is another area of communication research, kind of where I've oriented myself a little bit in the project that I'm doing. So this is a risk versus benefits question. So for instance, would you rather have a 10% chance of mortality or a 90% chance of survival? When you read a study and it says you have a 90% chance of surviving if you take this drug or whatever it is, you're going to be more inclined to say, participate in a clinical trial or something. But they're phrasing it in a way where and there's research behind supporting that, looking at the positives rather than the negatives. And then this kind of goes along with education research a little bit, which is why communication, education, policy, it all works together because we're all trying to get at the same thing. But how do you design effective messages that people are actually going to listen to and actually want to interpret? So looking at new ways of media rather than just giving a paper to somebody and saying, read my paper, read this news article, sharing news articles. People don't like reading. It sucks. It makes you more intelligent to read, but people don't like to do it because they'd rather do something that's less mentally exhausting. So put them in front of a TV and show them the video, and you're going to have a more effective message. Or, make an infographic, make a really cool illustration for your that's kind of where I've oriented myself in research.
Have you seen a bigger push to doing things like science blogging as a result of this too, as opposed to obviously it used to be the authority was it still is an authority within field to publish articles and have that be your way of disseminating research. But in terms of science blogs, obviously are big enough and coming and are what grabs media, for example.
Yeah. So I would say science podcasts are the thing this day in this day and age. Again, it's less mentally exhaustive than reading, which is really sad, but that's how people prefer to learn things. And so I would say podcasting. I would say actually that it's more doing outreach than it is writing a blog. Blogs are cool because it gets the scientists to write in a more informal fashion to a larger audience, but you can go a step further and put the scientists in public and talk to people like a conference or something, and that's even better.
And social media, I guess, is another way of doing that.
Yeah,
that's huge.
Having a scientist in an informal setting, in an informal way, is what's important, no matter what your medium is. So then I give you all of this. What's the answer? How do we design better messages? How do we reach more people? The first thing that I would say, the most important part is to abandon the deficit model. And that is kind of going back to what we were just talking about. You can't approach a topic with somebody and say, I know more about this than you do. Here's the facts. Because they don't respect that. You have to know who you're talking to and know who your audience is and take that into consideration. It will never work unless you play off of the emotions of the audience that you're talking to. Because they're just going to look at you like you're perfect, essentially. And then the next one is to work together as scientists. So you may be the expert in whatever your respective field is, but you may not know how to reach the audience that you want to reach. So that's where communication strategies can help you out a lot. Or you may be interested in working with kids to know how kids feel about these topics. Find somebody that's in an education department working with that. You're never going to be the expert about everything, but you could be one mind in the room that's working on the problem together with somebody else. And collaboration. We've known from group projects that we've done our whole lives that collaboration makes something a lot easier than if you were talking about yourself sometimes, unless your group just kind of sucks. This is interesting, and this is where kind of the stuff that I do in my job plays in, is that you have to make what you're saying interesting. So you have to tell a story and not just a tweet-sized problem. So we've seen a lot of a push recently and always for scientists to have like a 60-second elevator pitch of what their science is. And that's great, but that depends on the audience that you're talking to. If you're talking to a politician, 60 seconds is all they've got, so that's great. But if you're trying to talk to somebody that doesn't know what their science is at all, you have to make it interesting to them, and you have to give them the rich details. And so science storytelling is a really big area in terms of like science media, like what I do with my job as a science writer. We're working to make more videos, or to, for me, we're going to have a podcast where scientists talk about their science in a storytelling kind of way. Talking about where they came from, where they got the idea, and how it failed 10 times over, and then they got to where they are now with the science. It's important. It all plays into the end result. And after that, I would say make the message personal, know who your audience is, and know what the biases they have are, and then try to appeal to those. You have to clearly articulate why people need to care about your science. You have to add the human element to what it is that you're talking about and what you're studying. Because if you come up to me and tell me that you're studying environmental toxicology and you're doing work that's really important for the environment, if you don't tell me how it's going to directly affect me in my everyday life, I'm going to glaze over. And that's may not be me personally, because I'm scientifically enthused, but the everyday person is not. The everyday person doesn't know that much about science. So you have to find a way to, level up with the people that you're talking with. And then talk with your audience, not to them. Inclusion is super, super important. There's actually been studies about how when you engage, when scientists engage in like a two-way dialogue with people in terms of like a conference or a town hall meeting or a forum or a science cafe, the people that come to these events not only understand the science better when they leave, but they feel like they have, a more informed decision that they can make about the science because they had questions they were able to ask, and the scientists was right there to answer the question. And so, for instance, the UK, the Parliament over in the UK in 2000, they kind of put in place laws where institutions have to do more of this. And what they found is extreme, that the population over there understands better because the people that are participating in these events, that they understand more. So super important, and this is why when you apply for huge grants from the NSF, they make you have an outreach. You have to go and engage in the community that way. And the other thing is if you can make an issue localized, that's also super important. So if you can say how this is going to affect the area where people live, you're going to care more about because it's going to directly affect them in that area. So this is fun, which is why I included it. And I think it's a great way to end this discussion. So this is, there is a science comic. Let's see what his name is. I'm pretty sure it's right. His name is Randall Monroe. And he has, I think, a PhD in physics, where he comes from this background that he has. But he was always interested in science communication. He always liked illustrating. So he, made a website where he posted his science comics. And, huge. He's written books. And he has written a book called The Thing Explainer, Complicated Stuff in Simple Words, where he essentially goes through and explains science, like scientific things, with the 1,000 most commonly used words in the English language in America. And when you do that, you are limited in what you can say. So for instance, this is the Apollo 5, and he's trying to explain what that is to people. And the Apollo 5 obviously was the first, shuttle that landed on the moon and had a man on it. And so he called it the U.S. Space Team's Upgoer 5, the only flying space car that's taken anyone to another world, explained using only 1,000 words because it's the most popular. Further on in the picture, he has like the people space where the people sit, and the thing to help the people escape really fast. There's a problem. Everything is on fire, so they decide not to go to space. And it's really funny. It's a really good book if you would be interested in something like that. Some other ones that he has in the book, he's trying to explain what a cell is. So he calls it tiny bags of what you're made of. What a microwave is the food heating radio box, or a nuclear reactor is a heavy metal power building. just a lot of really cool ones. And this link here at the bottom is actually a text editor that was made off of the book. So you can go in and you can actually type in what your science is, and if you are using Word that's not one of the 1000 words, it will put a red squiggly under it, so you have to go and find a different word to explain that. And you'll find that when you do it, what was once a concise sentence about what your science is then becomes like 3 sentences. And so I would say for this, it's a good exercise if you're trying to look at how to dumb down your science to speak to a more general audience, but it's also, it's fun practice is what I would say. I just thought that would be a fun place to end.
I'm sending them the link.
Do you have questions?
I got one. Is there work with respect to like getting the general public engaged or developing a relationship there? Like you were saying, how these guys point a lot, of course, relate their research to the general public. But on the other side of things, there work looking at more like systemic or societal issues where we only have so much time to get in a growing population of people, especially like people in college or in debt, they have 2 or 3 jobs, and not that much free time. I guess that kind of relates to sort of that pyramid was. Food, housing.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, you can only, that's so.
That's huge, and actually.
So is there, like, as far as like how effective the engagement that you can have with the public, do they also do the research into like how, because I'm guessing like, more people are into climate change knowledge, you're up to 2 hours a week of work and more time to work on yourself and be engaged in the community. Is there research into how receptive people are to these messages in different sort of societal units or structures?
Yeah. So that's a communication strategy, right? Like, how are you going to reach that person that's working a full-time job and they don't have an interest in what you're talking about? It goes back to the salience of issues. And again, the hierarchy of needs, I'm glad you brought that up because that's so important. Which is, it's just so important because if somebody doesn't have food, water, and shelter, they're never going to care about what you're saying. Like you honestly, you shouldn't even try because that's not the place that you need to come from. You need to work on how to get them food, water, and shelter.
Well, and if what you're studying, I guess, impacts their ability to get food, water, or shelter, that's obviously a huge framing problem. So like
Yes.
with climate science, we obviously know that something like food might be a scarce commodity if we are unable to grow crops. So that's a good tie-in too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As far as specific studies of that, I'm not sure, but I bet if you give me an hour, I can find you some. Yeah. Because I'm guaranteed that there's research out there for that. Yeah. Yeah. So we have like 5 minutes left. I just want to pose one question, and maybe we can bounce around some ideas on it. But and Dave, I just talked to you about this last night, so you should like not chime in as much. So I just went to a conference last week, and we had a really good discussion about whose responsibility it is. Is it the scientist or is it some other entity, a science writer, a science communicator? Whose responsibility is it to build public trust in science? And I'm curious what this room thinks about that, because that's a huge, huge area of research in science communication, is how do we build trust for scientists that are honestly, for the last few decades, scientists, their public perception is held. It's not super high. It's not up there with like teachers or childcare workers, but it's in the middle. Whereas people that are in the media and are trying to talk about what all of these issues are, their public perception is way low because we don't trust the media as a whole. So I'm curious, does anybody have any opinions on what that strategy is?
I think the way you framed it today was really good in terms of know your resources where you are and use them, because like I can try and beat my head against the wall as long as I want. But if there's someone at Clemson who is more qualified specifically to the communication aspect of it, why not work together and it's mutually beneficial? Mm-hmm. And it's like serves as a good filter. So I think that was a really good way of putting it. But at least in my opinion, it's like, what is the point of doing it if it's not accessible to a certain extent, especially if it's government funded?
I would almost put it down on the scientists, just because if you can't, it sort of goes back to the if it's not published, did it even happen kind of thing. And so if you can't if you weren't able to publish it, obviously you weren't able to convey it to a point where somebody would accept it and publish it. And so if you haven't got to that point, then you certainly haven't got to the point where like a non-scientist person would be able to understand it. And so you're trying to ask someone, a second entity, a communicator or something, to explain something that you haven't even explained very well. And so it has to like the hierarchy of explanation. So you start with the technical and then work your way up to more
Isn't there research?
up to or 5 level information.
Isn't there research on levels of communication in terms of that? Or I guess, what did you just say? Or like levels of technicality in terms of your message? I think that's a really interesting topic that if we do another one of these would be a really interesting thing to discuss, of like how I communicate with others who share my expertise versus how I communicate with the common public versus how I communicate with a 5-year-old.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although, I feel like within that, there's also this idea that just because you can get a paper published and it's in your field and respected there, doesn't mean that it would translate at all, and in non-technical spaces. It reminds me of, we were having a conversation in our computer science education group the other week about how for a lot of research schools, teaching isn't a priority, so I think part of it's just what is the priority. So you can be a research professor, but 80% of what you're expected to do is in research. You're not expected to necessarily be a great teacher. So just because you can be a really great researcher and perform great research, write it up well, get it published, doesn't necessarily mean you're a great communicator to everyone. So it's a great question that you ask. I don't have an answer. It was more so just a comment.
I think, Kazembe, bouncing off of you, I think that ultimately the responsibility of the trust in science is a manifold responsibility of society that we all share a part in. But the first responsibility lies with us as scientists. I'm a social scientist, so I don't work with the natural world, but I understand and use hypotheses and data collection and testing of hypotheses to understand social phenomenon. And it's ultimately a self-governing structure, science is, and it's on us to be able to hold ourselves individually accountable, as well as other people in our disciplines accountable, and being able to have that. And then outside of that, it starts becoming, how do we include other actors to where they can feel like that they have, because we're working in the public interest, that their interests are being represented by science. An example that I would use is the fact that a lot of biomedical research uses sampling of the population that only includes white males, and typically younger white males, rather than females or other ethnicities or other ages. And that means that there's a large segment of the society that in our sampling for biomedical research is not being included. So how can other people feel like what we're doing is in their interest when what we're doing is really understanding things that are in the interests of a very small subset of the population?
Do you guys in your fields have people come with you and do like field site visits or data collection?
I don't do field work.
You don't do field work?
Do stem cell research.
Oh, cool.
So I already have my own level of
It's interesting. So like I study people. So they have to come to my lab, and at the end I always have to tell them the purpose of the experiment, why we did it. And it's so interesting to hear them after the fact, what commentary I get by including them in the subjects. Our undergrads in psych have to do it. But then I have like money associated with my study. So then I get other people off the street to come do it. And I find that's a really interesting way to engage people, is having them physically do the work. I know like sampling in conservation research is a good way to be like, okay, I can see this actual population of species being impacted by going out there and picking up garbage from the site that I'm in, which I think is an interesting topic too, of engagement with public and actual research participation.
I think the responsibility, I agree, certainly belongs to scientists, but I don't think scientists are prepared to carry it out. In many ways, we're not expert communicators, we're not experts about people. Most importantly, we're unequipped to investigate our own biases. We're horrible. We make assumptions about the purpose with which we communicate. Assumptions are often wrong. I think, I haven't heard anybody in here say, why are we to influence people? If you don't know that, you're incapable of doing it honestly, in my opinion. If you don't know why you're trying to influence someone, you are not honest with yourself or with them.
That's a really good point.
Well, I think to that point, I think that's a great point. And I think that there's a twofold issue here. There's the first-fold issue of, as scientists, we have to get money. And in order to get money, we have to communicate with people to get grants. And so that's communicating to a subset of experts. Then there's a second issue of, to keep the aspect of science going, we have to communicate to keep it in the public interest. And at what point does the communication start wagging the tail of science, or the tail of communication start wagging the dog of science, meaning that the communication drives what we study and drives what we find, rather than that we're able to drive what our curiosity and our theories are pushing us to be able to test and be able to find. I think, I don't know your name, sir, but I think that was a great point that you made.
Well, my name is Will. I think that most science communication is actually advocacy for something, typically for money, as you put it out, Grant. We all got to have money. If you're going to do science, you got to have money. And we get it from a lot of different places, and we have to go advocate for it within those places. I think as scientists, we need to be very clear in our own minds about when we are advocating and when we are discussing science. The two are not the same thing. Scientists are no more immune to confirmation bias than anybody else in the world. In fact, a lot of studies say we're more susceptible to confirmation bias than the rest of the world. So, if we need to be really clear when we go into a meeting with a policymaker, which we typically aren't. I am here as an advocate. I want something. I'm trying to persuade you to do something. That's a very different thing than saying I'm going to explain science to you. And it's, I think, very dangerous to confuse those things. And that's part of the erosion of scientific credibility that we see.
You have to walk a fine line, though, like with because, like I mentioned, I do stem cell research, and so more importantly, arsenic toxicity on stem cells.
Yeah.
And so, if my deep southern rooted Alabamian family, I tell them I do stem cell research. Well, I'm the next Antichrist walking across the earth. I've murdered millions of children in their eyes, and so in order to continue to be the scientist that I wish to be, and and try to convince them that yes, you like successful birth rates. Well, successful birth rates comes from doing successful embryonic stem cell research, and you can't have your cake and eat it too. You have to give and take as far as what do I find that scientists do that is acceptable versus what I actually want from a scientist. And so I want good birth rates, but I don't want you to try to figure out how to make more successful birth rates.
I think we have to accept the fact that people will differ on what they find ethical for scientists to do and what they don't find ethical for scientists to do. That's, I don't know any scientific way to determine ethics.
Right, that's its own question.
So, go ahead, Ray.
Oh no, I was just saying that that's literally its own conversation, its own.
Yeah.
Great. Next
I
topic.
think that might be a great topic for a future lunch and learn.
It's with the advocating, right? So you're advocating for money, but you're also advocating for rights to continue a certain research.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to step on some wrong toes in the wrong crowd, and then so this advocacy could actually turn into you damning yourself to for whatever you're trying to achieve.
It's a chance you take. I think you have to hit that issue straight up. That I believe this is ethical, and I'm going to try to convince you it is.
Do you think that by being upfront about what you're doing, that may help people trust you more because you're being clear about here is what I'm trying to do, and here's who I am today and the hat that I'm wearing? Do you think that builds trust?
I've been doing it a long time, and I do find that that's important to let people know that you're aware that, when I would go into the General Assembly, I know that I'm the 4th person today, or maybe the 14th person today that they have had asking them for something. That's all people do with them. That's what they see 100% of the time. Here's somebody that wants something. And I tell them, here's what I want. And I know I can't compete with widows and orphans and starving children. As my old friend Vern Smith used to say to raggedy-ass children, you got to get.
It's your southern charm that wins them over. Good looks.
And tell them that, here's why I think what I'm talking about is important. But recognize that there are a lot of other important things in the world too. And to me, science, the credibility of science is not worth sacrificing for any advocacy point of view. That's my opinion. And I see it being sacrificed on a daily basis by people who want something.
Yeah.
So it's almost 1:10 right now. So I want to go ahead and wrap up in case anybody has other things to do. Our next Lunch and Learn will be on Tuesday, October 30th at 12:30 with John Bellato, correct? Grant?
Yes, at 12:30. There's an outside chance it may move later, depending on room availability. But for right now, it says 12:30.
What does John do? What is he going to talk about?
So John Bellato has a million titles. He's in charge of the optics and material science research park area out in Pendleton. He has his own facility with his own company that also works. And he will be talking about how scientists can play the role of job creators in local and regional economic development. So the role of scientists as a job creator and how we as scientists play into that spectrum and can be able to help other people, maybe some who don't have PhDs, be able to find a way to work in scientific disciplines.
What was the date again?
October 30th.
Tuesday, October 30th at 12:30 p.m. The location will be announced, and there's an outside chance it may move to 5 p.m. depending on how many people we think may be coming.
Cool. This is a lot of fun. Hannah, a quick plug. What resources on campus do we have for science communicators? Like, is there like a hub that we can go to? Is there a website that would be helpful?
Yeah, so every college has a public information office. I work in the College of Sciences. Those people there are equipped to help you strategize with your science. They know the media outlets to get it in, and they know events that are happening and places where you can talk about it. Clinton Colmenares works at the university level for research communication. He's super interested in helping people talk about their science.
He's done Grad 360 as well, so sometimes look for those events if that's something you're interested in.
Yeah, Magna's a great resource. I can send out an email afterward with some more if you guys are interested.
Yeah, did you say you could share your slides too?
Mm-hmm.
That'd be a great time to do that.
Yeah.
Other things, on Tuesday next week at 11:30, we're having our next planning meeting, which I believe will be virtual.
It will be virtual via Zoom.
With that, are we having people email if they want to be involved, or are we going to send out a follow-up email with the survey? You want to do that? Include that in the email?
I would, if you want to be involved, we'll be sending it out to everyone because our planning meetings are about, while there's a core group of us that have been very involved and very engaged, we want them to be open to other people who want to be part of that core group and be very involved and be very engaged. Like Kazembe joined us a few weeks ago. So we would love to have you join us. And then we will also be sending out a survey via Qualtrics to everyone who participated today. So if you can take it, it takes, I think, a maximum of 7 minutes, but it should take about 3 to 5 minutes. If you can spare 3 to 5 minutes to share your thoughts and help us improve our events, that way we can make a better value for you in the future.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Anna, great job.
Thanks for the talk. Yeah.
while we're physically here? Anybody?